Okay, your new album, 6x6, wonderful vinyl copy I have here, is out officially in the UK tomorrow, I think on the 19th. It's a wonderful
Yep.
album, and I will certainly be putting a purchasing link just below this video. But my first question is a rather obvious one, and that is, how did you arrive at the name 6x6?
I'm trying to give him a call.
Okay, we'll do that again in a minute.
Nigel, what do we have? Like a list of 100 names, right? And I think I even said, every name's been taken. And Nigel, do you remember I said something awful, or I wrote it in email, some nasty name? I said, look it up. And sure enough, a punk band had it, right?
Yeah.
I had seen the length of human DNA was 6 foot 6. I'm trying to remember now. Right. And I thought, oh, that's a good name. And sure enough, it was taken. Right. So we were talking about it, and I said, I sure like the look of the S and the X in Saxon, and Saga has an S. I said, just for logo, those look really good, you know?
Yeah.
I thought, well, 6'6", maybe we should call 6x6.
Right.
And everybody thought, yeah, that's the next best thing. And that's the way I remember it. You never know how things are juggled around so much. Whose mind remember things a certain way, but I know that Ian likes to say we have 6 of everything between the 3 of us.
Okay, and I've got a comment on it. It's wonderful artwork. I mean, and who's responsible for this remarkably good artwork?
I appreciate you saying. That's a friend of mine, Rob Fowler, did that, and I think Nigel was the first one when he saw that the picture went, oh, that's brilliant. We got to use that. I wasn't so sure, you know.
As soon as I saw that, I just thought that is so different. I mean, we had one rule, didn't we? You know, no space.
Right. Right.
Well, no spaceships, did you say?
So we saw that. And I mean, as soon as I saw that, I just thought that's great. That is so different, you know.
Yeah, it's very striking.
I mean, that would make a great poster, you know, just great.
So how did you all kind of converge to be this band? I mean, how did you where did your paths all cross, so to speak?
Well, I guess, I mean, my path first crossed with Robert in GTR.
Yeah.
You know, and when that sort of thing sort of collapsed, we kind of lost touch just for a little while, but then we sort of met up again. He came to a Saxon show in San Jose. I can't remember. What was the name of that club? I can't remember.
Yeah, Long Gone Club, the Rock Bar.
It was great. And so we met up there, and we kept in touch ever since, you know. And then Robert suddenly emailed me out of the blue. I've got this band. I've started this project stroke band with Ian Crichton, and you're the guy. So that was me. That was it. I'm on my way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we'll come on to your work with GTR in a minute, because I'm interested in that as well. But this album is a wonderful balance of like hard rock, but it's proggy enough to sort of pick my interest. I mean, did you have an idea from the get-go what sort of album you wanted to make? Do you think you wanted a hard rock album?
And you know Nick Shilton. I think you've worked with Big Train and stuff, and been involved with him. And you know, I did my last 3.2 album, which I considered the 3 in the series of 3. That's it. It's the last material I had with Keith Emerson. I'm not going to do one on my own. And Nick said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'd like to find a guitar player with the genius of Keith Emerson, a guy that makes up uniquely like Emerson parts, well, a guitar player that was uniquely him, not a guy that plays, you know, power chords and ripping solos. I mean, that's all over the world. Like Steve Howe did in Yes, but I want somebody that sounds like Jeff Beck or Eddie Van Halen, you know, something powerful." And he said, "Oh, well, think about that." He called me back the next day and said, "What about Ian Crichton?" I went, "Oh my God, I wouldn't have thought of him because I don't know Ian, but that's perfect." I mean, when I listen to Saga, he's got this outstanding sort of angular, it's him, it's Ian, Ianisms, you know. So Nick tracked him down. We spoke. He sent me a few things. I wrote songs out of them, just like I did with Keith. He sent me little genius parts and they inspired me. And when I sent it back, he goes, wow, I think we have something here. And of course, again, when, how do I put it? You know, you have a puzzle piece that all these jagged edges, you know, where's that puzzle piece going to go? Okay, that's the important part because it's got this thing, this special thing. Then you need to glue that in. Well, that's kind of my piece, you know, I'm going to glue it in. But how do you build the foundation for that piece to really sit and be solid? And in my mind, the only guy that I've played with that I thought was like adding Alan White to Yes, or like adding Cozy Powell to ELP, that like really laid it down, was Nigel. And luckily he said yes, you know, because he could have said, I don't think so, I'm busy, because he is busy. He just got home, right?
Oh,
he just got back from Saxon touring. Right.
I mean, it's I'm glad whatever the powers that be that brought you together, I'm certainly glad they did, because you produced a wonderful album. But you mentioned GTR, so you both worked with Steve Howe with GTR. So I've got in my notes, it was like an attempt to resurrect or revitalize this band. I presume Steve Hackett had left by that point, is that right? Okay.
Yes.
And there's also an Asia connection, the band, not the continent. Did either of you guys work in Asia? Is that Ian that touched on Asia?
Both Ian and I worked in Asia, but separately. I played on tracks on the Aqua album, which was the first John Payne.
Yeah.
Tracks I did are on that, and also you know, those sort of compilation albums, two of them they brought out, Archiver, one and two, some tracks on both of those. How
did you find Steve Howe to work with?
He actually, when I
don't want to get you sued or anything.
I mean, no, I mean, I found it, you know, he knows exactly what he wants, you know, and so full marks to him, you know, because I guess, I mean, particularly the GTR thing was, I guess, kind of his baby, you know, him and Steve Hackett, and so he knew what he wants. I mean, it was difficult at times, just musically, but you know, it worked. And with the Asia stuff, I didn't see him with the Asia thing. I was just there in the studio with Jeff and John.
Right. I mean, Robert, you did Tales from Yesterday, which is like a Yes tribute. Are you guys big Yes fans at all?
My first successful band, Hush, started as a progressive rock cover band, and to wind up writing and playing with Steve Howe was like a dream come true. You know, it's funny, someone just sent me something off an album that Steve put out last year, and I forget what it was called, but like the rough mixes or something, you know, and the cassette he gave me with the first song, No One Else to Blame, is what I made out of it, but it was like, there's someone to blame. There's always someone to blame, I think was a song. And I heard it for the first time since 1986 when he handed it to me. I'm like, wow. Because he handed me that when I met him at his house and said, well, see what you do with that. I'll come back tomorrow. Gave me like 24 hours, right? And I found if I was just me and really dug into it and wrote with him, that he appreciated my piece of it. But he still had definite ideas. He was a very sweet guy, and I had a great time with him. I think he's become tougher as time went along because he has to be. I mean, he's the last man standing, and yes, kind of, you know. I mean, as far as the yes he'll accept. And I think he's a lot tougher now than he was back then. But like Nigel said, he had some definitely already, the ideas were solidified, but I spent a lot of time writing with him before we got into the studio and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I answered the question. I'm thinking, you're talking about, I'm thinking back what a great time in my life that was, because I had no success worldwide at all at that point.
Right.
You know, just add to that, I was approached about, well, the first time I went into have a jam with Steve, I was like, oh, because I was a huge Yes fan.
Oh, okay.
I thought, I mean, I was scared shitless. I'm allowed.
Well, I hope you made you feel. I hope you made you feel at ease. Anyway, there's a wonderful song. There was lots of great songs on this album. But one of them that stood out for me was a song called China. It's fascinating. It's got this great chugging guitar and lots of nice keyboard motif. But it seems like quite a political number. I'm just wondering what inspired this song.
You know, I'm not really a guy to write political things. I write sort of positive things, you know, battle of a lifetime. And that's where I kind of live. Like, how can I make a difference in the world tomorrow? I know what I'm going to do today. And Ian has sent me this sort of finger picking guitar thing. It kept going through my mind. I'm like, geez, it wouldn't go away, you know? And I was going to bed. I'd seen this thing on the news about Chinese trying to exterminate the monks and all these things going on in China that I had no idea about. And that was bothering me because I'm thinking, gee, how can today, I know it's communist and all that, but how can they be killing off people? And so went to bed, and as I'm going to sleep, this guitar riff and this TV show reporting documentary came together, and I started singing China. And I went, wow, that word sounds so good to sing, first of all. And I jumped out of bed and I wrote the chorus and the verse, which that never happens to me. Usually I sit down with an idea and it comes out, but that one sort of grabbed me and took me. Funny enough, our first YouTube video, first single release, Yearning to Fly, is about 110,000 views now in 8 weeks, or maybe 10 weeks. The second one, Save the Night, is 102 maybe in 4 weeks, came out second. China, in the first 5 or 6 days, hit 60,000. Oh, I'm going, wow, this is really going quick. And then it stopped. And I thought, well, wait a minute. This is more rocking. This is going to appeal to the Saxon fans more than the other stuff, probably. And there's lots of those. And what's going on here? So I always thought, wouldn't it be great to get banned by China? But I think we've been flagged by YouTube being political, which, and it's not a terrible criticism. It's just, they're infiltrating. Be careful. Watch what's going on. You know, that's all it says. Anyway, again, if I answer the question, I'm so excited about this, so passionate about it. My mouth, Nigel, I apologize for letting my mouth run.
You know, I mean, it's we're living in very strange political times at the moment. It's there's an old I think there's an old Chinese curse, isn't it? May you live in unusual times or something like that. But it's certainly a strange state of affairs, that's for sure. But it wouldn't surprise me if a video titled China would be flagged up, or certainly being watched, I think, or perhaps flagged as being potentially inappropriate or something like that, simply by the title rather than the content.
You know, I've seen a couple of China posts with that title in it about, I mean, there's some guy with a post about the sex trade in China. It's really frowned on by the government, of course, but he has this whole place for Chinese people to experience the possibilities of bondage and all that, just to see it going, okay, well, that's getting through evidently. So
well, it's this algorithm. It's a strange beast. I don't really know how it works, to be honest with you, but I think it's I certainly can't fathom it. Nigel, is there a big difference to kind of working in a band like Saxon in comparison to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think sort of you know, with this 6x6, I mean, musically, there's a lot more sort of, you know, light and shade and stuff, you know, from a playing point of view. Whereas, you know, Saxon's pretty, for a drummer particularly, is pretty full on.
Yeah.
You know, there are times when I've got to think, I'm not denigrating Saxon at all, but there's times I've got to think more musically. You know, with
for this band.
Yeah. And I mean, but you know, I am a prog head anyway. I always have been. You know,
if you're a prog head, how did you end up in Saxon?
Good question. I mean, you know, it's kind of like my influence is, you know, being bands like, you know, well, Yes and stuff, and Camel, all those sort of bands, plus you know, I think my favorite sort of heavy rock drummer was like Bill Ward, but he was more, you know, and this is another thing where I come from. And, you know, I was always listening to stuff like Chick Corea and Billy Cobham, and that's where I come from, you know. But no, I mean, the Saxon thing ended up because their manager at the time, I was in a band with him, my first pro band ever.
Yeah.
You know, and then the Toyah thing came along.
I'm going to ask you about that. You're probably hoping I'd forgotten all about it.
No, and then he just rang me up and said, look, they've got a tour starting and Pete Gill's hurt his hand and everything, and can you do it? So I said, yeah, okay. And that's how it happened.
Okay.
I just have a style.
You know, I have to say, what makes Nigel so great for 6x6 is that he writes music too. And his music isn't heavy metal that he's writing. It's kind of all over the map, right, Nigel? As far as I can tell, because I got some new stuff from him. We're going to make some great songs out of, and I think he sort of plays to the song. And that's a musician drummer, not just a drummer, you know, and it's a little different because what he brought to 6x6 is sort of different on every song a little bit, you know. It's got his style to it, but he played to the actual songwriting and the vocal and the chord structure. For me, that was really refreshing because I'm a big John Bonham fan, so I like it really solid. Right. But then again, the music I write and that I've been involved in isn't just solid, you know, and he brings that even to the sensitive parts. There's a foundation that he puts to it, and I really believe because he's a songwriter.
Oh, okay, it's interesting. There's another wonderful song on this album that I really enjoy. That's The Last Words on Earth. It has a kind of a reverential quality. Probably the organ at the beginning gives it that. But there's wonderful metallic sounding guitar as well, which is established all the way through this album. I'm just wondering what it feels like quite an angry number. I'm just wondering what the story behind this particular song is.
It's funny. You brought up how this crazy world we're living in now, you know, how things are. And my whole thought was, wow, if it does all explode, if people stay as angry as they are, we could have totally different political views. I don't care, you know, successful guy, you do a great job. I've heard your reputation. That's what matters to me. You know, what you think about something you have very little control over. Okay. And same with me, you know, I can't get Biden out of bed and give him change his diapers, you know. I mean, we're screwed. And if it really blows up, what is the last word going to be? Will we be here to hear, you know, the last word on earth? What could it be? I wish we would have cared for each other more. So that was my thought process anyway. And again, you know, Ian and I were trying to see how we got along writing wise, and that was quite a ways into it. And we're starting to think this is really going to be good. We need to start talking to record companies, but we don't have a drummer. We need to get these songs solidified. That's one of my favorites, and no one's mentioned it. So I got to thank you for that. I see that live. I think that's going to just kick ass. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. For me, it was that keyboard at the start that immediately got my attention. It's like years ago, I used to like the sound of the Mellotron.
Right.
Anyone wants to use the Mellotron anymore because they were buggers, weren't they? They're really temperamental. But I think you can get a program on the computer now that just sounds like a Mellotron. It isn't actually a Mellotron. But,
right. You know, I got to say, I learned from a guy named Alan Fitzgerald, who was the bass player for Montrose, but the keyboard player for, I'm not going to think of their name because I'm thinking Montrose now, Brad Gillis, Night Ranger.
Okay.
And Alan was in my band Alliance that I have with Gary Peel and David Lauser. And I said, Alan, how do you put keyboards in that band? I mean, it's two great guitar players. There's guitar all over the place. And he did the same thing for Alliance. And I went, oh, interesting. You know, he picks these things that make it super big, but it doesn't have the edge to make it stand out. That was a little bit of the keyboard idea in 6x6 because we want to perform as a 3-piece. which you probably are going to ask that, how are you going to put this music out? Well, again, thinking Rush, well, they did it. And if they did it, we're going to do it. And that's the fan base, I think, that's going to appreciate the depth of our music, even though we might be a little bit harder rock than Rush was, I think,
Yeah.
But Alan Fitzgerald made an impression on me when he showed me how he fit those keyboards back in there, because there was keyboards in songs that I didn't even think Night Ranger had keyboards in. And it was interesting, but once in a while, the keyboards have to be featured, like that organ. So again, it's the reason that I wanted it to happen. You're picking up on all those old pieces, which is, I can't help myself. I live in a studio, those type of comments mean a lot to me.
Well, it's I know Rush, the keyboard parts, Geddy Lee played the bass and the keyboard parts, didn't he, live?
Yeah.
So it's a pretty good question, actually. It's how do you want to go out as a three-piece? What's your idea about faithfully representing this music, other than resorting to sort of backing tracks, which nobody really wants to do, I suspect?
Yeah, well, Nigel's going to have to play keyboard with the left hand while he's playing the drums with the right hand.
I think he's up for it.
Yeah, actually, he can play keyboards. So, there's a couple of places we have like orchestra hits and stuff that Nigel will be doing once we get together, record and set those up, because they're like percussive,
Yeah.
But I just got a bass that doesn't have magnetic pickups on it. It has light sensor pickups, which means that you can plug a MIDI cord into a synth, and there's no delay whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And my plan is on the stuff where, let's say Ian has to go into a guitar solo and we got these riffs with guitar and bass going on, I'm going to be able to trigger a real guitar sound off my bass. So I got that covered. I'm going to have a keyboard system that has left-hand bass and right-hand keyboards, but I'm also singing all these songs. So probably it's going to take a headset mic. So I've been thinking about it, but it's a big undertaking. But, I'm no Geddy Lee, but I see what he does and I think I can do it. So I'm going to give it my best shot.
Absolutely. Why not? Nigel, out of interest, what's your favorite track on this album and why?
Oh, God. I know this is corny, but I just love the whole thing, because to me it's just totally refreshing,
Yeah.
Skyfall's one of my favorites, actually. In fact, that was the first one Robert sent me. And as soon as I heard that, I went, oh yeah, So that particular one does hold a sort of special place in my heart, so to speak.
Right. I've got to come around to that question. I know you're probably dreading it. I've got to ask you. It's I was watching you playing It's a Mystery.
Oh God!
On top of the pops.
Yeah.
I've got to. What was the pop scene like in the early '80s? One.
What? Sorry.
How did you get involved? Did you hear me?
Yeah. Sorry, the dog barked.
I was going to ask, what was the pop scene like in the early '80s? How did you get involved with Toyah? And what was it like doing Top of the Pops?
Well, first of all, the Toyah thing happened because I was doing a session with, there was this New Zealand guy called, whether it was his real name or not, I don't know, called Zane Griff. I think he was New Zealand, and he was like a bit of a Bowie type character. And I know one of the Ultravox guys had played keys on his first album. And I was sitting at home, and because the first pro band I was in, Hans Zimmer was the keyboard player. Mm. And Hans rang me up from Germany and said, oh, Zane needs a drummer. Do you want to do it? Because he'd played on the first album as well. And I went, yeah, cool. So there was me, Steve Bolton, who was in Atomic Rooster and then went to The Who. And, oh, God, what was the key? And the keyboard player, Mark, I think his name was, Mark from Bebop Deluxe.
All right, okay.
We were jamming stuff. We were working in a rehearsal place in London, and Zane suddenly went, oh, I want to go and check some photographs out of this photographer's studio. So I went in there, and Toyah turned up. And I was actually, I was a Toyah fan, so to speak.
She was small and orange in those days, wasn't she?
She was, yes. And she turned up. Where me and Zane were talking drums, and I noticed out the corner of my eye, Toyah's ear suddenly pricked up, and about 3 days later, I got a call from her producer asking me if I'd go in and do It's a Mystery. Because I think there was another guy, we did another band I was in, which was a band called Bruce Woolley and the Camera Club. Initially, there were three Buggles, although they weren't called the Buggles. There was Jeff, Trevor Horn, and Bruce Woolley. Okay. And I was in Bruce Woolley's band for a while and had recorded at this certain studio, and the engineer there had recommended me to Toyah as well. So that's how that worked. Did that, and then Top of the Pops. Yeah, that was quite amusing, really, because I bought these fiberglass cymbals, so they wouldn't make any noise. They just went click. But because you never know how when you're doing playbacks, you never know how loud it's going to be.
No.
All this stuff and pads on the drums so they wouldn't make any noise. But no, I mean, it was good fun. But I couldn't actually believe how small the Top of the Pop studio was.
Right.
And they'd all these kids round to each stage. See,
I remember when I was at school. Of course, that's how long ago the Toyah thing was, and all the boys fancied Toyah, or who was that other one? Kids in America. Kim Wilde, wasn't it?
Oh, Kim Wilde, yeah.
They were in Toyah, I think, with the posters on walls everywhere. I think they were. I've got a few questions relating to Saga, but we can jump those. I was going to ask, was it difficult revisiting the material for Rules Have Changed? After Keith had passed, did you find it difficult doing that?
Yeah, we had. I'm trying to think now. There was 9 songs on that. The theory was to do exactly what we had done in 1988, basically, which I think there's 9 songs on that one. And we had about 7 of them written. And as in Ian, Keith had sent me his parts, these great keyboard pieces that I made songs out of. So I had his stuff. The last thing he told me was I have to do these shows in Japan that I'm dreading because there's like 3 in a row. And he goes, what do you say? Was he 72 years old? He goes, I'm over 70 now. And I said, yeah. Well, I'm thinking Mick Jagger might have been quite a bit older even then, right?
Yeah.
And he was dreading it because he goes, yeah, there's 3 shows are sold out. And then he let me know that they had 2 shows a night and it's going to be really rough, but he's going to do them. And before he came to the studio, he had to see his grandchildren in England. And that's the last time we actually talked on the phone. So it was upsetting, of course, to me because it was 27 years later. And I thought I'd never get to do another 3 album with Keith. And it turns out that he got the live album that they put out and realized what a great band and how good we were live. And he wanted to do one. So my hopes were way up on the Richter scale, then way down on the Richter scale, It took me a while. It was his son, Aaron, that actually said, hey, so I sent Aaron a piece, hey, that's what we worked on, and he said, wow, you really should finish that. I said, well, it's hard for me to think of doing it all on my own now because the record company wanted 3. They wanted the 3 of us. Carl didn't want to do it. He has his own thing going. He's doing great with it. That was fine. We're going to use Simon Phillips on the drums. At this point, there's only myself. So I said, well, let me see what I can do. I put it together and a couple of people, Nick Shilton, one of them said, well, this is really tremendous, and you let the company put it out. So it's still difficult for me to talk about kind of, I miss the guy just as a human being. He's a wonderful person. And he treated everybody as if he wasn't Keith Emerson, it's like he's a regular guy. And it was tragic loss for the same reason that 3 went down, which was because of Keith getting criticized, that some of that was also the reason that we lost him. Not all of it. There's other things that were going on, but it's sad, still sad for me.
I mean, what is your would you say your most enduring memory of Keith Emerson is?
first time Carl drove me out to his house, we were going to rehearse in his barn, and he had these big iron gates. And hey guys, hey, glad you're here. Look, where is he? And at his huge mansion in Sussex, we look up and there's his ass sticking out of the window, and he's speaking with his butt cheeks. And, I mean, I didn't know the guy well then, you know. We had spent time at Easy Hire and different things. We had some great lunches but who is this guy? What is? I wouldn't do that. He was an exhibitionist, is what he was, you know. And it's just a memory that I can't get out of my mind. The other one I have is something that Jim Davison sent me, a video when Keith couldn't make it to his birthday, and I won't even discuss that, but it's just insanely funny, and not the guy you would think, the genius, the greatest keyboard player ever lived. You just wouldn't think of him like this video.
Well, he comes across, you imagine, as this classical keyboard guy, prog, as quite an intense, serious guy, doesn't he? But hearing your stories projects a kind of more human side to the man, I think.
Oh yeah,
I'm so glad you shared them.
I was afraid, you know, I did well with Steve Howe, other people, Joe Lynn Turner, some people I try to start bands with and work with. I was never worried about it because for some reason I thought, if I do my 110 best I can do and they like it, I'll have a partnership. If I try to fake it like with Steve and do yes stuff, we got nothing, right? So I always went in like that. But I was worried to meet Keith because I didn't think he'd speak in complete sentences and stuff. I thought it'd be Einstein, you know, genius. He'd be talking in equations. Totally different. He was, I would say, as down to earth as Nigel is. And Nigel's a funny guy and really easy to hang with. And that sort of qualifies it. You see how Nigel is so welcoming and easy.
Yeah.
You know, just really an easy person to, I mean, Ian, not as much as Nigel, and he even got along with Ian okay.
Right. I mean, with this album, I mean, how did the writing actually happen for this album? I mean, how did it kind of get pieced together? Did somebody write the lyrics and somebody else write the music and it kind of came together? What was the process?
No, it was sort of like I said with the puzzle pieces, you know. In fact, I have stuff from Nigel, stuff from Ian for the next album, and none of them were completed to do albums for the Saxon or for Saga or something. They're parts they came up with that have these genius little pieces in them. At least in my mind, I take the part that I think is the greatest, as I did with Keith, and I write the song around it. I'm trying to think on when Ian first sent me some things, all the songs had James Bond movie titles, all the pieces. And they were just little riffs, you know, or the finger picking thing for Battle of a Lifetime. That was it, right? I went, oh my God, listen to that. And I looped it, started singing to it. But, you know, Casino, they were James Bond titles on his files, and that's the way he logs things on his computer. He'll have a thing, maybe he's
favorite songs on this album.
Yeah, maybe he's talking about farm animals, you know, or thinking about it. So those song ideas will have farm animal titles. And funny enough, those titles sparked some things that made me think of different lyrics. And I hate to use the word that it was easy again, like Nige. He's easy because he's not all that easy. He's a heavy hitting drummer. He could probably beat the crap out of it if you wanted to. But the lyrics kind of flowed out in a way because I was so inspired by little bits of music. And of course, I've had a lot of songwriting experience. And for me, to put those parts together with the right bridge to get from one side of the water to the other side is sort of what I do. So it's the way the writing started. Now, like I say, Nigel has sent me some things that I think are really great, and Ian likes them too. this is going to be, the next album's going to have one more bit of expression to it. And Nigel, did we lose him maybe? Barry, are you still there?
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I don't see
We're
Barry at all. So.
Listening, man, this is great.
Okay. Well, Nigel, have you opened your vinyls?
No, I haven't yet. I'm going to. They're here in a box. Remember,
the first one was black.
I've only just got back from the UK, so.
I know, but this yellow looked kind of cool, you know.
Yeah,
definitely. I don't know which one I've got, whether it's the I think it's just the ordinary black vinyl. I've not taken it out of its cellophane yet. But I think
my first one was black. I thought, because we had picked Ukrainian colors, not being political, but we thought it'd be the right thing to do. But there's no teal blue, I don't think so.
Okay. I've got to ask you actually, Nigel, in terms of drumming, a man who knows drumming. One of my favorite drummers is Keith Moon. I'm just wondering how you would rate him as a drummer. Do you think there's wonderful technique there, or do you think he was just mental?
I think it's a bit of everything, really. I mean, for me, the thing that sums him up is something that Pete Townsend said. I just remember this in an interview, and he said, "Yeah, I write the stuff, and Keith comes in and just solos all over it." That was just a perfect quote. I mean, he's, it's perfect. What he played with the Who was just, it's great. You can't fault it.
No, I think he was so unique, and his drumming suited that music.
Yeah,
Kenny Jones had a bit of a hard time sort of fitting in after Mooney died, of course.
Yeah, you couldn't. I did see the tour with Simon Phillips playing when they played in America, and they did Tommy and stuff. And Simon was great. He was superb on that. Yeah. But no, there was always this sort of wild element with Keith. Is he gonna get through this one or not? And then you see various footage. I think there was one. I can't remember what year it was, where he just collapsed behind the drums, and they just pulled him off like two roadies.
76. That was. He'd taken an elephant tranquilizer, hadn't he, or something like that.
I think that was it. Was like San Francisco, wasn't it? I believe.
Wasn't it Texas?
Was it?
I think 76. I think it was.
When I was really little, I was like 9. My dad took on Vox guitars and amps, imported from England, what the Beatles used. So I would get to go and sit with the stage manager with the spare Vox AC30, because nobody carried spares then, right? And the Voxes, of course, were burning up because they were set for the English power. And I got to go sit back there for the Who. And I snuck out of his little lighting booth where they had the handles for the lights in the old days. And I went back to look at Keith Moon's drum set, and naked ladies were painted on each one. I don't know if that's a famous drum set. And at 9 years old, wow, I'm looking at that. Of course, there was no cameras and stuff for me, but that was my first introduction. And then I saw the guy play. I'm like, from the side booth. And it was just, wow. I've never seen anything like it. And even like Nigel said, you can't fault it. It was perfect. And who would get away with that, Nigel? Was it his thought process that made it perfect? Because it's part of the writing and the sound of the whole. It's not just the drum rolls; it's a thing, No,
he is a unique player. I keep listening to sort of Who stuff now, and I think, well, some of that stuff, those fills and stuff he's playing, they're in really unusual places. They're not usual. They're not like your typical. Oh, here we go. Here comes a fill into this. There's like fills in the middle of the verse and stuff, but it works.
I read Roger Daltrey's biography, and his complaints were the Who used to play too loud, which made it very hard for the singer. And he said often the sound was very dense. It was incredibly difficult to find moments and spaces to breathe. But he also, funnily enough, he said, we laugh at all the sort of Keith Moon's antics now looking back, but he said when you were living with it at the time, it was absolutely maddening.
I bet. Actually, getting back to his drumming, it wasn't until I saw Who Are You, the video of that. I think that's the first time I've ever seen Mooney with a hi-hat. because he didn't use hi-hat very often. A lot of pitches, he's got a ride cymbal over there, no hi-hat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that must affect. I mean, does that, do you think, contribute to the way he played? You know, his style of playing that made him so unusual.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, he was a unique player, definitely, without a doubt.
Yeah. Anyway, coming back to this album, Reason to Feel Calm Again. I'm just thinking about that track. I wonder whether it's a track that seems rather befitting now in a time when we've gone through all the madness that was COVID and everything else. Am I right there, or am I barking up the wrong tree?
No, that's exactly it. It's there's a lot of people that are afraid. You know, those people that wear their mask when they're driving in their car all by themselves, they're afraid. You know, I don't fault them for it, because they got scared by what went on. And there's Skyfall is about anxiety. You know, it's about people. And I only had anxiety once, so I can relate to it. When my dad died for 2 days, I felt like nothing was ever going to be okay in my life, you know. And this one is, it's okay. You know, there's a reason to feel calm. We're getting through this, you know. Yeah, we've lost some people, but we've learned. And I got to tell you, when I got that bagpipe guitar thing from Ian, that's all I got. He sent me, I went, oh my God, how does a guy make his guitar really sound and feel like a bagpipe, but you know it's a guitar, you can tell it's a guitar. And it was just so beautiful. And I got out the keyboard that Keith helped me get, the Korg Oasis, which has the most incredible sounds on it. And I started those big chords, and it just flew out, you know. And I thought, this has to be the song we start with, because I want Ian Crichton, the guitar player that I don't think has the credit he should have, even though people love him, they're always great, but he should be right up there with the Jeff Becks of the world. I want him to walk out on that stage when we start, all by himself, hit that Moog bass pedal, boom, and do that. Just a white light on him. Maybe he has to wear a little kilt or something. But as that,
it's shocking for the 4 people in the first 3 rows, though, he's wearing a kilt.
Yeah, he's not gonna like that I said that, but but that's the way I saw that song developing. And then, of course, the gear shifting in it and things was because this is going to be the first song. We're going to have to kick a little ass. You know, we can't just sit there with the bagpipes going on for too long. So, yeah. But you hit it, right? Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. Well, my final question is one that I often ask people: if you could have written any song in the world, which song would you like to have a writing credit on, as saying that I wrote that?
Nick said,
a bit of a stinker of a question, isn't it?
Nick said you'd be tough. And I thought, so far you've been pretty good to us. Oh man, you know, for me, we'll see what Nigel comes up with, but in my life that the Beatles wrote about, there's places I'll remember all my life. That song still hits me really hard when I hear it. It takes me right back to, like, my dad, my mom, losing them, some friends, musicians along the way, Keith. It is really a beautiful song. And it also, of course, I love Don Henley, so End of the Innocence is the same type of song in a much different way, you know. But those two, I'd have to say, are songs I wish I would have had my name on.
Nigel's relieved that you answered first, because it's given him a reprieve to think.
He's looking through his phone. Let's see, Monkeys hits. The Monkeys, Daydream Believer.
No, funnily enough, yeah, I've got a couple. I mean, the first one is a Beatles one as well, actually, and it's Here Comes the Sun.
Beautiful number.
You know, my sort of thing. My kind, you know, I know it's sort of like going off the sort of rails here a bit, but my sort of thing is, you know, people say, oh, about the weather and stuff. I said, I don't care how hot or cold it is, as long as the sun's out. And that's my thing. And I think the other one is is it's a Moody Blues track actually called Watching and Waiting off To Our Children's Children. I think Justin Hayward wrote it. It's the last track. I mean, those two songs I just play all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. As Moody Blues go, I love that Legend of a Mind. They did their third album.
I mean, the Lost Chord
one.
In Search of the Lost Chord, I think, was the first serious album I ever bought.
Yeah.
Before it was the Monkees, you know, it was, you know, and then suddenly I heard this stuff. And then after that, it went to, like, you know, Disraeli Gears, Cream, you know. Then it was like, I was gone, I was off.
You know, the question of which song do you wish you could have written and had the owned the publishing rights to? I asked that to Mick Box from Uriah Heep, and he said, I wish I could own the rights to Happy Birthday. It'd be a very, very rich man, wouldn't he?
Yeah, yeah. Listen, I've got it before we finish it. I've got to say this, because I mean, I don't think the guy gets enough credit for it. Robert, I'm looking at you.
Oh, no.
Robert laid all the templates down for the drum tracks, you know, and full marks to him to doing. He's a great player. You know, shut up.
I'm listening to the album, revisiting now, and I'm hearing what you did to those basic things I laid down as a songwriter thing. And I've told you just before, I told your wife, even though not face to face, it's the feel of a drummer. The good drummers like Simon Phillips, they have a feel and they have a foundation, a lock on that just, you know, I'm not going to mention the name of the guy that was in GTR before you, but when Steve asked me to join, I said, God, I don't love your drummer. You know, he didn't have that feel. And you got that thing. And that's what makes the music breathe.
Yeah, but you put the templates down. You were the guide for me. So, you know.
Does my finger look as big as yours pointing? Huh?
Shut up.
Our first fight, a lover's quarrel.
Just a quick question, actually, if you'll indulge me, is the album 3. Some of these 80s albums, to me, when I listen to them now, sound incredibly dated due to the production of the time. I mean, I think that music sounded much better live. I'm just wondering if there would ever be a chance of revisiting that album and doing a kind of a special package with it, maybe a remix or something like that.
I would love to do that. I tell you, the reason that album doesn't sound the way I'd like it to isn't the keyboard stuff. It's tremendous. It's not even the bass guitar, but the drums. We had a lot of, oh God, what was the Dynacord and stuff? Their samples were so harsh. And we have a lot of that on there, that harsh kind of sound. And Carl got the Remo kit that had the clamp-on drum heads. There's just a lot about the drums that make it a harsher album than it needs to be. And I would love to remix that, but it's gotten lost in the Universal or something bought everything. I'm just not sure. I've tried to get to Geffen to find out, but I think Geffen sold it off, and also there was a fire or a flood, or who knows. But I would love to do that. I think I would love to do it with the same sound quality as the 3.2 albums have, and you know, put different pictures. And I do have another song we never used called Business and Pleasure that would have been great. It's a wacky tune, but it has some great honky-tonk piano. Yeah. But unless somebody finds it for me and knows what to do with it, I don't think I'd be able to. I certainly have the equipment to make that album sound as good as the 6x6 album, you know.
Yeah. Anyway, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you both. It's a wonderful album. It really is. I really enjoyed it. I was thinking that this is going to be, I do a video at the end of the year, my top 10 albums of the year, but this is certainly a contender to be right up there. I really enjoy this. As I said, there is a purchasing link just below this video. I would suggest anyone go out and buy this.
Well, let's get your commitment right now. Let's put in the top 10.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there you go. Definitely in there. Anyway, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. Best of luck with this album. I hope it sells loads, and buy a Porsche or something from the proceeds. But I hope it does very well. It deserves to do well. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having us. Great.
My pleasure. See you, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.